moving over to tooth development. This, I still basically go through our notes, but I kind of mashed it together just to more explain how it's all happening at one time, if that makes sense. I hope this makes sense. So, tooth development starts at 5 weeks in utero, and it begins in the dental lamina, which is the tissue. So, like if you look at like a born baby's gums, it's like the utero version of just your gums, which is the dental lamina, and it thickens, and then the tooth buds appear. When the tooth buds appear, we're in the bud stage. There are 20 primary buds and 32 permanent tooth buds. So we start with the primary, those pop up however much time, I don't think it's much time, then there are permanent ones start to form as well. Okay, so the whole unit of the tooth developing in utero is the tooth germ. And the tooth, we start with the enamel organ, which arises from ectoderm and forms the enamel. So as the bud starts to develop more as the days go on, we get into the cap stage. So the cap stage has the outer enamel epithelium, the OEE, which is cuboidal shaped cells, the stratum reticulum, which is those star-shaped cells, and then the inner enamel epithelium. So in my little picture here, I drew the cap, which in this teal color, I have the outer enamel epithelium. The green color is the inner enamel epithelium. This whole unit I just drew to show that this whole thing is basically the enamel organ, and then those little stars are our stratum reticulum. So we went through from a little bud into that cap shape because we're growing, the tooth is growing, and then we're going to keep forming into the bell stage. The bell stage, we get there whenever the stratum intermedium appears, which is, I have the same colors in my picture here as we did in the cap stage, and I added this orange line here to be our stratum intermedium. And in this stage, we're developing more, so that's when our odontoplasts appear. Those are our dentin cells, and they're here below the stratum intermedium because the dentin will start forming like the inners of our tooth. So they move inward, and after 1 day of those odontoplasts going on, they make a whole row in 1 day, then our ameloblasts appear, and those are our enamel cells. So they go on the opposite side of our stratum intermedium, and they move upward, forming more of like the crown of the tooth where we have enamel, because it's our enamel cells. Going back to odontoplasts, they move inward to start forming the dentin in the pulp of our tooth. So I kind of drew like my little molar roots, just to show that they'll keep growing in and in and in until they start forming the root of the tooth. And as the ameloblasts build, they're building up, and of course they're going to push that stratum reticulum up because they're building. Those were already there, so they have to just kind of move out of the way, and we'll see what that forms later. So they're still there. Just keep that in mind that they are still there because it's just growing. The odontoplasts, they move inward, like I said. They form dentin and pulp. And this is part of the dentin papilla, which is formed from the mesoderm. Like we learned before, the mesoderm's the middle, the dentin, and the pulp. And ameloblasts, like I said, they appear after 1 day of the odontoplast, and they just move in opposite directions. And these form enamel, and they build outward. Okay, so we're in the bell stage. And that is, we just continue until we get our little tooth. So, there we go. So while those are growing, there are 5 stages that the tooth, I keep saying the tooth, go through. We have initiation, which is the beginning. We initiate growth. So that's in the bud stage, and this is whenever that dental lamina, the tissues are thickening and the bud can appear. Proliferation, that is just more and more cells proliferating, so growing, we're getting more, and it's just building up. So that's in every stage because we're continuously growing. You have to grow from a bud to the cap. You're growing more to go from the cap to the bell stage. So that's proliferation, you're just growing. Histodifferentiation is within the cap stage and the bud stage, and that's just whenever those specialized cells appear, which are our ameloblasts and odontoblasts, the enamel cells and the dentin cells. Morphodifferentiation is in the bud stage, cap stage, and bell stage, so all of it, and that is just genetically what the tooth is meant to be. So you're morphing into a canine, you're morphing into an incisor or a premolar or a molar. It's just what it was destined to be, so it's morphing into that. And then apposition, only in the bell stage, because that is, let's make apposition like its position. So it is mineralizing, it is becoming permanent to, or hardened, mineralized into the tooth. So it's finishing up. So if apposition is mineralizing, it can only happen in the bell stage because that's our last stage. And it continues until the tooth is completely hardened. And then after apposition stage, we're ready to erupt. So the eruption happens starting with that stellate reticulum. I'm going to pull up that other picture, like I said it would in. So, like we talked about before, the ameloblasts are pushing that stellate reticulum up. So it doesn't just disappear. It goes all the way up until it makes the sheath. It's Hertwig's sheath. Hertwig's epithelial root sheath. So the stellate reticulum forms a net the tooth must push through. So the ameloblasts push it all the way up till it's on out of the tooth, and then it forms a net in the gums, and that is what it has to dissolve and push through in order to erupt. And once it erupts completely, that is when we have enough room for the root to form and be finished. And then then they have little teethies around 6 months old. So then we have all the abnormalities. I wasn't going to include those in the video just because I don't think many people have issues with that. But if you have any questions, just let me know.